So, I really related to what you were saying tonight. So this is about the topic of serving and redemptive love, but it's a little different than maybe the way you've been talking about it. Just because in my particular case, I sort of had the up and out awakening at a young age as a teenager, and I also had a very strong orientation towards service.
Yeah.
So my redemption has been more about having to leave that and come back into focusing on taking care of parts of my human self that I hadn't really wanted to deal with and look at.
Yes. Because you can use service to not deal with your human self too, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually find that I actually go a little nutty when I turn towards focusing on myself in a certain way. I'm so much more comfortable with the up and out and with the focusing on serving, and it's not a focusing on serving where I'm losing myself in the other, but it's a focusing on serving where there's not there's a freedom from the self in that way.
Yeah, right. I understand.
The tricky thing for me, and I seem to be very naturally wired now towards that, after decades of a certain orientation, it's much more challenging for me to focus back on the human part, and I made a conscious decision actually through some discussions with you, and it felt like a bit of redemption to kind of in my own world as myself to come back in and deal with parts of myself that I hadn't sort of neglected.
Yeah.
And it's been quite challenging. But it's so the challenge for me is in trying to turn the flashlight on myself, human self, and I still find I'm still in the midst of that challenge. And,
sure, it's not as instinctive to you as serving, as helping, right? But
Right,
I think the reference in you to utilize, because it's always good to have a reference within your own experience that you can utilize, is the reference of when you serve, and that's natural to you, that's more easy and natural and flowing to you. But that attitude, the way in which you serve, that is the same sort of attitude to bring towards your own humanity. That attitude, that view of service, now you're serving your own humanity. You're serving whatever the light of divinity or light of consciousness wants to touch upon within your human experience. But that is an act of service as well. It's just not an act of service out there or over there. It's an act of service here, inside.
Yeah.
But it is an act of service. And it requires a certain kind of, I'm speaking metaphorically here, so don't take it too concretely, but it is a kind of sacrifice as well. You have to kind of sacrifice the fully transcendent, I'm not really being touched by anything in the world of time. You have to kind of sacrifice a little bit of that stance, that perspective, in order to get fully down into here, into one's humanity, because, usually most human beings, when they come really fully into their humanity, there's a lot of wonderful things about doing that, but they also, what we're encountering is, like the old stories say we're going to encounter, like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, he's encountering parts of himself that are still in darkness, or they're still in serving other agendas. They're still, wanting certain things that don't really line up with his true nature. We just naturally encounter those parts of our humanity that aren't really fully in alignment quite yet, because they see themselves as other than that truth. And that's a kind of sacrifice.
Yeah. The tricky part for me, I think, is that is that it brings up self-concern and sort of a self-referencing that creates a certain, it just creates something that's very difficult, and especially considering that I lived with a relative freedom from those things. Yeah. And yet it has felt necessary.
Why has it felt necessary? What drew you to this other interest?
It drew me to come back and sort of...
Yeah. What told you it was necessary? What indicated that?
Well, partly some discussions with you, but I had reached a point where I realized I wasn't going to get up and out of this whole thing, and there wasn't some place it was going to finally lead to, and that I needed to really kind of. There were ways in my personal circumstances I needed to give some attention to, and there were definitely things in terms of my own personal psyche that I had found a way to be free of, but it didn't mean that they necessarily went away. Yeah. And so it was kind of, it was just something that wanted to go to the next phase with this and wasn't willing to just kind of, be comfortable, I guess. But, But, I've had to face more in the last couple of years of this. It's in a way, it's like I've come back down into it without the mechanisms or the tools that I had before to sort of, deal with the pain, rise above it in a way. I've had to. I'm meeting it more head on.
Right.
And so it's
right. You're not rising above it. You're meeting it.
I'm meeting it, and so I feel like this is the right direction, and I feel like I wouldn't want to go back the other way, but I do feel perhaps I'm not as skillful with it as I could be.
That's not as natural to you as the other way. Yeah. Everybody has a way they're hooked up, right, where some things are more natural than the others. So this isn't quite as natural, quite as instinctual to the way that you're hooked up, Yeah. And so it's a little, it's more challenging. I mean, heck, for almost anybody, that's the reason that so many people are trying to transcend, because they don't really want to, because their humanity, that's the problem they're having, their humanness. And it's wonderful, as you've attested to, it's wonderful to be able to do that, to kind of wake up from identification with body and mind. But of course, at the end of the day, we've still got a body and mind, and it seems that reality, the greater reality, its agenda is really not to avoid anything. Its agenda is to function fully through the body and mind. Yeah. And that's as I say, that is itself a kind of sacrifice, a kind of it's a redeeming process. It's because it's, as I think I said in the very first week, the up and out is what it's motivated by the avoidance of suffering and the desire for truth, both. The sort of down and in kind of which is literally its own kind of awakening, is not motivated by avoidance at all, which is almost something that's entirely foreign to most human beings. It's motivated by love. Love doesn't move away from what's in conflict, what's in sorrow. It tends to move towards it. Yeah. And we move towards it as an act of love. That's what compassion is, right? Compassion is, oh, you're hurting. If we're selfish, we go, you're hurting. Oh, that's going to bother me. I think I'll just leave you alone, right? But that's not a human instinct. The deeper human instinct is, oh, you're hurting. Here, let me sit down with you. Let me join with you in it. That's actually a very different. That's not always easy, but is very definitely loving, and that's the attitude. That's the instinct that you're drawing upon. Otherwise, all you're drawing upon is sort of a trying to do it correctly, or it's more of a technical trying to do it the right way. but it's important to draw upon that sense of love that naturally moves towards anything that doesn't see itself as whole or complete, or it's not totally functioning as well as it could. Yeah. That's an act of love.
I think what's kind of I'm realizing here is that, I had this sort of feedback internally from my system of what I might think of as progress by how free I felt for so long, and this doesn't feel that way necessarily.
No,
it
feels totally different.
You're not really getting that same freedom. And the other thing is that when I heard you talking about the redemption, I had redemption. I know you talk about redemptive love being down, but I got restored to my dignity when I had my up and out. 18, suddenly I was free from a childhood of suffering and just a whole new. I was given wholeness, and then it feels like this has been another movement of redemption. To kind of willingly leave that, and to come. And to come down and to deal with things that I hadn't.
To find the wholeness in the humanity.
Yeah.
The same wholeness that you get when you transcend, actually. It ends up to be the same wholeness, but it's the wholeness in the form of your humanity. Yeah, and it's not measured by how free I am. It's a whole different, there's a different, as I often say, there's two kinds of freedom, what I'm free from and what I'm free to.
Yeah.
I'm free of body and mind. Great, well, good. Now, are you free enough to embody body and mind? Are you that free? And that's a different way. It's a different feeling of freedom, and it's a different way of measuring freedom. Am I free enough to really be completely and absolutely and totally here with all that entails and all that demands? And when that really opens up, as it's starting to open up on you, but as it really, really opens up, then there's that great influx of, there's a great freedom with that, and there is a great love with that, and a great intimacy with life, with actual life, that you realize that wonderful recognition that you don't have to transcend life to feel free. You can actually be very much part of it and feel a great sense of freedom and well-being. And it's not either or, it's just completing the picture. It's the transcendent and the immanent. It's not that one is better than the other, it's that one is actually just kind of incomplete without the other.
Yeah, and I see that the thing is kind of very efficiently taking me straight to the part of the center of what needs to be healed within me. I don't know how to heal it, but I do know it's brought me there over and over again, and it's like
good.
I feel like that has to be looked at before. That's what kind of kept me from moving to what you're describing there.
Right. Well, the first part is already done. It takes you there very efficiently. That means you're not resisting it a lot, so it's taking you there really. Then the second thing is you bring a sense of love and compassion to what you're seeing, and then you also start in the midst of that love and that compassion, which is what brings you there. It's also seeing, okay, what is in here? What are the old assumptions? What are the stories? What are the myths that got created in the midst of difficult experience that is holding this together? Because there's always some narrative that's holding pain together. The narrative is creating an experience of being at odds with life, or at odds with your past, or you're at odds with an experience or with a particular person. What is the narrative that's keeping me at odds with? And is that narrative actually really true? And that kind of question isn't to be answered in the mind, It's to be taken into that. The first thing is to see the painful parts of my humanity are being held together by an old and ancient narrative that my mind has been telling itself. and really believes that it's true, really believes that it's true, and you go in there and you start to look at it, you start to realize that what you're experiencing is the narrative. That in many sense, that's all that we are, that's all that one is experiencing is the narrative. And when that's seen through, when that lets go of itself, then you stop experiencing that part of your life, that part of your existence, through the narrative. You just experience it as it actually is. And that's a type of freedom, a profound kind of freedom. Okay, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much.
Very good to talk with you. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Bye, Ajay.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I think that was a fantastic call for a lot of people because, so many people have had these very powerful, transcendent kind of awakenings, and now they are, whether they want to or not, whether they'll even admit it or not, they are encountering their humanity. And the question is, am I going to come on board with it? Am I going to consent? Am I going to agree? When my own spiritual life turns that corner where, okay, now it's time to really encounter my humanity. I may have transcended it, but now I'm bringing that sense of freedom and unity and wholeness and completeness wants to be discovered through and through. Not just completeness when I transcend everything, but completeness in the midst of everything. The absolute completeness and dignity of your human experience, of your humanity. That kind of completes the whole circle of freedom. It can be challenging in its own way. It's not always at every instant pleasant and easy, but it is ultimately the work of love.